This is the GT-RC R V1 chassis. This is a 3D printed modular chassis that I released on MakerWall few months ago. This one is able to reach 80 km per hour and it's able to be installed on any car that I have released till today. But the thing is that it has some problems that I found during all this time. And that's why today I'm presenting to you the new GT-RC R V.1.3. This new updated chassis has new suspensions, new supports, new connectors, and even stronger parts. On the V1.0, as you can see, the front suspensions barely worked, the chassis barely tilted or compressed, and so it was quite hard to drive it on hard conditions. The rear suspensions was quite the same, where most of the times they barely work or compressed, so meaning bad handling. But on the new V1.3, as you can see, now the suspensions work with this new pushrod system design. Also, the same with the rear suspensions. Now the chassis can tilt and entirely compress and behave in any condition. We got new front body to chassis connectors that, by the way, can be now adjusted when it comes to the height. These connectors also had been installed on the V1.0 and it was something essential to get a minimal, enjoyable experience. Now we get into the steering racks, new locking systems, like we already got into the control arms. Now we have a new sliding system. Just unlock it, move in place the steering rack wherever you want, lock it again, and as simple as that. Remember, on the V1.0 we have this locking tab that we had to pull out, place in position, don't lose it, and pull back again. We have new logos and designs, we have an improved chassis, we have improved control arms, improved locking systems when it comes to the strength and how easy it is now to assemble them. And in this video we are going to be taking a look on how to convert the V1.0 into the V1.3. But remember, if this is the first time that you see this project, you have a video in my channel on how to disassemble the MJX HyperGo 14300 series chassis, which is the one that we are going to be taking the components from. So the first thing, of course, that you will need to do is to 3D print all the parts. Remember, this chassis has been entirely redesigned from the ground up. You will also need an electric screwdriver and also some M3 hexagon type bits for the mm M3 wheels screws. These ones are not available or coming with the MJX HyperGo chassis. You will also need a magnetic mat, as we will need to group all the bolts. One thing worth mentioning is that on the MJX HyperGo V2 we have hexagon style bolts, while on the V1, as you can see, we have star-like bolts. Another thing that is worth mentioning is that the ESC, I don't know if it's called that way, but whatever, the ESC in this case has a power button outside the ESC, while on the V1, as you can see, it's built inside the ESC. Even though these changes don't matter, as the bolts have the same length and width and the ESCs have the same functionality and same mounting points. So as said, you will need different type of bits depending on which MJX you have. Also some super glue, some lubricant grease, also we will need some lubing oil, we will need some Allen keys depending on the chassis. You have a hammer for the bearings, we will need double side tape by 3M or whatever you want. That one is going to be used on these components. Another thing worth mentioning is that on the V1 we'd have this fixed hood, while on the V1.3 we have this movable liftable hood. This is to access easily to the battery straps and install it easier. Also, we will need some tweezers and some flash cutters to remove all the supports from all the parts and components. We will have also these 3D printed tools to install the bearings, and also will help us to install them from the housings of the chassis. Also, we will need the controller to set up the servo, and during this first part of the video, I'm gonna be showing just some few parts of the assembly of the V1.0, just to show some features that are worth mentioning. Once we deassemble the entire chassis, we will get into how to assemble the V1.3. So let's start with the deassemble of the V1.0. And so here we have the first feature that is worth to mention. As you can see in the V1.0, the V-rings are exposed, so this can lead that in a crash the V-rings or the center hubs can come out from place. Also the dirt can get inside the V-rings, broken them. So on the V1.3, as you can see, this has been fixed by covering the V-rings entirely. This way we not only prevent them to coming out from its own housing, but also we prevent the dirt to get into the bearings. Not only that, this new design also gives more stability to the whole bearing and in the whole center hub design. Now the next important thing is that no matter if you are deassembly the V10 or if you are into the deassembling of the MJX HyperGo RC chassis, the first thing that you need to do once you start to take out all the bolts is to group them, as I told you before, and so this way we can select each bolt in a more easy way later for the V1.3. Now let's take a look to the steering servo housing. As you can see in the V1, it was a two-part thing to hold the whole steering servo. Now on the V1.3, that's not the case. That's an entire part that is built into the sub-chassis, and this way everything is more simpler, easier and faster to install, and we will need less bolts. And here, as you can see, we have another problem. This is a steering arm, and as you can see, sometimes it came out from the joint very easily. And sometimes when you are driving, this came out, and this was something very scary. Now on the V1.3, this has been entirely redesigned, so that don't happen again. The central locking system also has been redesigned. After some times, this part started to bend, and this was something that you didn't want. So again, on the V1.3, this part is now stronger. Also, the own rear sub-chassis has been redesigned to fit in a more easy way this component and not breaking it while trying to install it. Here, as you can see, the V10 entire bottom is entirely scratched everywhere. This is something that can't be seen on the V1.3, and this is a proof that the new suspension is working perfectly. And these are the results even after knowing that the V1.3 has been tested in a more harder and faster way. And here we have the proof that the V1.3 has been redesigned in every single component. This is the steering arm, and as you can see, the differences between V10 and the V1.3 are insane when it comes to how stronger the parts are now. This is the steering column, and again this part has been redesigned a little bit in a way where now we have a little bit of more steering angle. Thanks to this new design, not only we can make tighter turns, but also now we can make some drifts or power slides in a more easy way. Worth to mention again that we have this liftable hood that now makes the battery change way much easier, being able now to access these battery straps in a more easy and comfortable way. Now also the central spinal pillar has been redesigned and simplified, as now on the V1.3 we don't have the suspension coilovers in it. Also now the battery straps channels have been redesigned and made thicker to support all the forces while driving, trying to hold the battery. And here, as you can see, we have our magnetic match with all the bolts grouped together into different sections. We are gonna be looking at different types of bolts, but to group them all, we have flat head bolts and we have rounded head bolts. Each one has been separated into different sections, as you can see, as we have flat head thicker bolts and flat head narrower bolts. Also into the flat head thicker bolts we have ones that are shorter compared to the others, as you can see. Also, we have rounded head, thicker bolts, and round head, narrower, shorter bolts. But as you can see, this can be easily differentiated. One way we can test if our bolts are narrow or are the thicker ones in the case of the flathead bolts is to pass them through these joints on the coilovers. If they don't pass, then those are thick bolts. If they pass through, then these are the narrow bolts. Another important change that we have right now is that each single component from the suspension geometry will have a serial number, so that way you won't mistake the partner of each component. Another new feature that we have is that in the V1.0, the power axes were entirely closed. Remember that when you choose from one position to another when it comes to the width of the rear part of the chassis, we will need to set up and change the length of the power axis. These components are the only ones that we need to replace in this case. Now on the V1.3 we have an open design, as you can see. This way we don't break the power axis while installing. Another thing worth mentioning is that on the V1.0 the control arms didn't have any channel to install the locking systems. That is something that has been included into the 1.3, so when installing these locking systems they don't break, which was something typically happened sometimes and referred by some users. Also, some holes have been inserted into the own design of the control arm, and this has been done to not only have better supports inside each component, but also to have better support removal. And here, as you can see, we have all the bolts grouped together to later install them and use them on the V1.3. So the first thing that we need to do is removing the supports from all these components. First, we will start removing all the supports from all these orange parts. These are the control arms. These are quite strong parts, but you must be very careful in some places. So be sure to be very cautelous with all these components. Remember to always check every single support. As you can see, some of them are very hidden in some places that can't be seen quite well. Also, in most of the control arms we need to remove these supports that are in the bottom parts. As you can see, there are some pillars in the bottom of these components. These are quite fragile when removing the supports, so be very cautelous. As said, we also have those inner supports that again must be removed, and always be sure that there is no debris inside, because this will then affect how these components behave. As you can see, here we have our control arm free of supports, and one thing to check if everything has been removed correctly is that the latches move freely. Here we have again a control arm with all the supports removed, but as you can see here, there's a small filament that can affect, as said, how the system behaves when changing the width of the whole RC chassis. Here you can also see more clearly all these channels for the new locking systems, so we can assemble them in a more easy way without breaking them. Now it's the same process but with the other side control arm. Here we have cleaned the other side of this bottom control arm. Again, check the latches. Here you can see the differences between these two sides. These are pretty noticeable differences, and there's a reason for that. And here is the reason. The right coilover, it stays more ahead than the left one. So that's the reason why the right control arm has a more thicker, longer wheelbase. And here you can see one of the front bottom control arms. Again, these are quite tricky and you must be very careful with this component because as you can see where the suspension control arm goes, it's a two-pillar structure and there's one of the pillars that as you can see is thinner than the other, and so when removing the inner supports we must be very careful. And again, you can see this inner filament that we got stuck into the inner side of this control arm. Always be sure to remove these ones. Here we have our control arm entirely clean. Again, check the latch, check if the entire strength of these pillars is right. Even though it may seem weak, don't worry because once we have all our bolts and all our parts installed, these components are very strong on the real practice. So here we have all our orange components, all our control arms with all the supports removed. And here you can see the serial numbers on our control arms. These serial numbers also will appear on the locking systems and on the extendable arms that goes in there. Once this first part is done, now let's get with all the gray parts, in this case, and the white ones, and then the rest. But let's start with this rear differential cover, and also this spinal that we have, that spine that we have on the rear part of our chassis. With this part, again, it's very important to revise all the inner cavities of this differential cover, as here we will have very high-speed gears going on. Also in here you can see that there should be a hole, but the support block it. So this is something that I have fixed on the final release 3MF files. And now it's time from the front sub-chassis, where we will have to remove all the supports where the servo goes, and also again we will need to check that we don't have any debris or any non-removed support inside all these cavities. In here you will also need to check if we have non-removed filament, so every surface must look as flat as possible. This is where the triangles of the control arms of the suspension goes, and again these parts are very weak, so be careful when removing the supports. Also remove the supports that we have here. Here's where the bolts for the steering column goes. And by so we have removed all the support from the front sub-chassis. Now we will get into removing the support from the housings of the bearings. These are way much easier removable supports, and also be sure to leave the parts where you taken, so later for the assembly everything is easier to pick. That hole that you can see right there is where the steering joint goes, so again make sure that there's no debris inside there. Remember those front holes on the V-ring housings? Well, these two goes in there. These are the front suspension's control rods. Again, very easy support removal. And these are the same parts. These are the control rods for the rear suspension. This is the battery cover or liftable hood, however you want to call it, where we will place later with our 3M double-side tape the gyroscope and the receiver for the RC chassis. This has some quite tricky supports. As you can see, I've been using tweezers for this one, and you must remove all the support and ensure that everything is clean and free until you see all these components moving. Here you can see the entire system free, and to lock it in place, as you can see, you must put that small latch into its own cavity. That is locked and that is in place. Now let's keep removing more supports from all these white components. This part will hold later the front top control arms. Also it will act as an anti-roll system. This is the rear and front connectors. Remember to peel those supports, these are the only ones that you should find. Again, ensure to clean all those channels. If you still find some debris, all you can do is to pass some tweezers or flash cutters through them. These are the triangles that we will later use in the suspension geometry. These ones are very easy to peel off the supports, but as said, these parts or surface where we had the supports must be cleaned very well. Again, check everything, it's flat and no debris in that surface. Most of the parts that you may have seen previously in this video are mirrored, and so they have left and right side, but as you can see, these ones are the same. These are the front triangles that we will have in the suspension geometry at the front. The other ones were for the rear suspension, and so these ones may seem a little bit more stronger, even though in some parts they may seem weaker. So again, take care of the support removal. Also ensure that there's no debris inside these cavities in the same way. Ensure that your front suspension triangles look like this one, and if you don't trust these parts, print them again alone, as these ones receive a lot of force from the front suspension. Now we will need to remove all the supports from these locking and sliding systems. This is the rear sliding locking system, and this one has pretty easy supports again, but one thing that you should do is to compress that small point at the front to make more easy the process of then slide it. These are the steering rack locker systems, and again these are very weak parts, let's say, but the support removal is quite easy. This is another part of the steering rack. This one goes connected directly into the servo. Again, very easy support removal. The main support that you need to remove is that one in the center. These are the rear bottom lockers. Again, very easy. And now the same with most of the locking systems that we have in the control arms. The supports they have are very easy to remove. And here with the locking systems you can see a serial number like we have seen previously in the control arms. And another thing that you must look is that these locking systems have like a declination, and this is to ensure that when you install them you must always remember that the part that always look up, it's like the part or the surface that looks to the outside, as you can see here. This has also been designed this way, so when you try to unlock the system, it's way much easier. Here you can see the locking systems with its own serial numbers placed in its own position. Remember the declined leveling on the other lockers? It's happening the same with the rear bottom locker, as you can see. This also happens with the secondary locking systems, where as you can see we have like a small hole. That hole always must look to the inner side. Here you can see how it's been installed. And this is the front locking sliding system, and as you can see you must to clean all the supports or debris, and also you must to compress that front lip. Here you can also appreciate how each locking system has a secondary locking system, and this again has like a declination, a leveling, and so that leveling must match with its own serial number partner, where here you can see that the center hub that goes into the first locker don't matches with the secondary locking system, so these parts are not but with these two, now as you can see, they match the center holes and also these declinations. Now let's remove these supports from all these blue parts. Let's start with this rear housing for the rear connector. Again, it's very important to remove all the internal support and debris. Here inside you can see some debris that later won't allow us to usefully lock the system. Even though after cleaning these parts you can see very deeply all these supports that haven't been removed yet. So as said, please clean them all. That cavity right there also must be cleaned, and that's where the locking sliding system goes. Now this is the rear connector that goes from the chassis to the body of the car. Again, this was almost removed, this entire support, but as you can see there was still some surfaces with support, so again it must look just like this. The part will firstly come like this one. This is the front connector, so again you must remove all the support. It's very easy, it should peel off entirely. Remember that these front and rear connectors are the part that will mainly break on a crash. This has been designed in a weaker way, so all the energy that you have in a crash, it's been received and absorbed by these components. So I suggest you to have some of this into your pocket every time you go out. These are the control arms of the steering rack, and so these ones, as I told you previously, I showed you these parts before, and as you can see these are stronger, so there should be no problem with these support removals. Only thing that you need to know is, like with all the parts, you must be sure to clean all the debris that we have inside here, just for having a proper and smooth operation later. These are the rear power axes. Again, these have very pretty easy support removal, and you must be sure that there's no support or debris for later easier install into its own housings and for the bearings. Remember that these power axes, the front and the rear ones, will have these M3 8mm bolts. As you can see, these are the fronts, and again we have very easy support removal. This is the front housing for the front locking system, front connector, and this part is very strong, but you must be very careless when it comes to some support removals, as some small pillars, as you can see, are very thin. Also, like with the rear connector housing, we must also clean any single debris, because this part has two sliding components. One way to check if everything has been cleaned correctly and uninstalled correctly is by placing inside the front slider. You must place it some few times until everything is been cleaned up, and later you can also use some lubing oil. So now we don't have any single support in any of our components, so it's time to start with assembly. So the first thing that we need to check is the rear chassis. Remember to remove these supports that we didn't show previously, but these ones are easy. And now the next thing we need to do is to install the primary and secondary lock. First goes the primary lock, as you can see. Once in, test it if the latches open and close. Now it's time for the secondary lock. Remember to install this one, you need to close the primary locking system. Once the secondary locking system is in and it's in closed position, remember that you shouldn't be able to open the primary lock. Now we need to take this structural spine and connect it into this rear differential cover. Into this cover later we will also add the coilovers. We need to take a rounded head screw. This one is the most tricky to install into the chassis, that's why I'm making this one the first bolt. Always remember to check the internals, as here we will have the differential gears. Now it's time to install only this coilover. This one is going to be reacting into the left side only. For this one, we need a flathead, thin, narrow screw. Once installed, check that everything moves freely. And now we're going to be installing the battery cover. This is where the gyroscope and the receiver will go later. For these ones we will need a rounded head, long screws. Install only the tip first. Align the bolt points and screw them. Screw them very tight, as in here we will have the gyroscope, and if this component moves, the gyroscope won't be behaving well. Now, let's get ready for the rear suspension geometry and control arms. We will need the locking systems, we will need the suspension triangles, the control arms. Remember that all these have the serial numbers on it. We will need to look for the number serial 3. We will need to install all the secondary locking systems thanks to this rod and connect them to the primary locking systems. Ensure that the rod inside these two is all the way through. Then install them into the control arms. Remember to follow the channel patterns into the control arms to install the locks. Check that the secondary locking system works perfectly, and later install the arm. This is the top one, so remember that the arm needs to face down, as you can see later. Once you install them for the first time, you need to pull out and in a few times just to clean all the internals. Close the secondary locking system. And now check that nothing moves. And we repeat the same process, but with the other side. Now we will start preparing the lower rear control arms. First, we will need to install the primary locking system. As you can see, this one is going to be a little bit more tricky, as you will need to force everything to go in. Now it's done. Once everything is in, remember to check that the latches open and close when sliding the system. Now we will need to install the secondary locking system. Again, this one is quite a bit tricky, but by applying some force you will be able to install it. Remember that the cover, the small hole that goes into the secondary latches, always face in, but also you need to check the shape of these two, as each side has its own one. As you can see, this one don't hit in anywhere. And that's it. With the secondary locking system, the primary locking system shouldn't be able to open it. But now we need to open it and install these arms. These are the lower arms. As you can see, these are double arms. And at the first time, these ones can be quite hard to install. But you know, tolerances in this project need to be highly reduced. So again, pull in, pull out a few times just to clean all the internals and clean any debris. Close the primary locking system and then the secondary. And now check that nothing opens and check that nothing moves out from place. Repeat the same process with the other side. Now we have the two lower control arms. Now let's create the housings for the bearings. We will need to take 4 bearings, 2 for each side. We will need the power axis, the housings and covers. First we need to install the power axis into its own housing. As you can see, again, this can be quite hard to install for the first time, but once it should move freely. Check that everything moves and spins freely. Now we need these components that are inside the 3MF file. These are to align the power axis with the housing while installing the bearings. First, pull the bearing in. Try to pull it as much with your own hands. And now we can use this bearing tool with the hammer. In some cases, the bearings may come inside into its plates, only making some force. This will depend on which filament you are using and the tolerances of your parts. Once one bearing is inside, as you can see, everything should move freely, but everything must be more tight. Now we need to install the second bearing. Remember, each power axis or each axis, in the case of the front ones, will have 2 bearings. And there we are. Here we have the 2 bearings, and now let's install the front cover of the housing. Remember that these dots, these holes that we have for the bolts must be aligned. You should use the other tool and the hammer to pull everything inside. Just a few taps with the hammer and everything should go in. There we have our rear housing. Everything should move freely, even though if you feel that there's some restriction, don't worry, because with the time everything will be clean. Now we repeat the same process with the other side. And there we have our housings for the rear power axis. These are the components that will get the power from the differential to this power axis. Remember that every time you displace the width on your modular chassis, you will need to use a different power axis, as you can see right here. Now we will need to take a thicker flathead screw. These ones are mainly used to install the control arms into the bearing housings, power axis housings. We will need to take these washers, remember and check that there are 2 types of washers. We have thin and we have a fat washer. In the case of these rear housings and rear control arms, The thick ones will be on the top, while the narrower ones will be on the bottom. So we will take first the thicker one. Place it into the bolt, place it through this hole on the joint of this control arm. Check the disposition of these ones and each side. Here you can see we are getting ready the left side. Now place in the thin washers. These are on the bottom. We will need 2 of these. And now bolt everything together, but previously we will need, or at least I would recommend you to use some super glue into these unions. We will have some vibrations, and just to prevent the bolts coming out from place with vibrations, I would suggest you to use some glue like this one. Now place everything and with so much careful bolt everything. Don't overbolt these ones because then you will break the internals of these bolts. Now check that everything moves. We should have some play. Now the top one. Again, be very careful. Don't overbolt or over-tight everything. Again, check that everything is correct and everything moves. Remember, the left and right side control arms have its own shape, so check this one using the video. Now, let's repeat the same process but with the other side. Now we are making the right side of the control arms. And there we have all our suspension geometry and control arms. But we need to make more things about the suspension. We need to take these suspension control arms, and also we will need to take the suspension triangles later. So first, install the control arms. Remember, you will need to install them on the lower hole of the control arms. Follow this shape. Watch the video carefully, because each side has its own suspension control arm. Now we will need to take a rounded head big bolt. Tight everything together, but if you feel that the system don't move freely, just untight a bit every bolt. The suspension arm must move entirely free. And there we have almost our control arms. Now we need to install the suspension triangles. For these ones we will need to use the rounded head short bolts. Align everything and install the bolt again. Only the tip, place inside the suspension triangle. And now bolt everything. Again, if you don't feel that these triangles move freely and even they fall by its own weight, then you should untie the bolts. These components have the same shape for left and right, so don't worry about this one in this case. And there we have our entire control arms with its suspension geometry. Now let's make the same, but with the front. We will need to take a look to serial numbers 2 and 1. So we will need to take all the control arms locking systems. Again, those will have its own serial numbers, the front housings for the bearings, the front axis, and also we'll need to take these steering arms. These ones are a bit tight on the joints, so you will need to carefully unlock them. We'll need the suspension arms at the front, the suspension triangles for the front, also the locking systems for the steering rack. Again, check everything. In this case, we will only use the thicker washers. These are the steering axes. So let's assemble everything like previously. First, the locking systems. And there we have all our locking systems. Now let's install them into its own control arm. Again, check everything that opens and closes. Remember, this is the arm number 1, and this arm tip, as you have seen, faces down. So be sure to choose the right side. When it comes to the width, I'm placing all the control arms into position number 4. This is also something that you should make. Now let's repeat again with the other side. Here you can see the L shape that these control arms have. Now let's take the lower control arms and repeat the same process, installing the locking system and then the arms. As you can see, this one, the tip of these arms face up. These are the serial number 2 arms. Remember that depending on the car, you will need to use position 4, 3, 2, 1 or even 5. And here we have the lower control arms at the front. This is the side where they face looking at the front. Now let's pair everything together. This is the right side. Now let's install the axis for the steering. These ones are a bit tight, so you will need to make more force. Just like that. Here we have one part of the housings. Then later with some tweezers you will need to fix these ones in place to install the bolts. For this task we will need the flathead narrow bolts. So pass them through this steering arm, as you can see, and you must align the lower part of this axis of the steering with the steering arm. In some cases you won't need the tweezers to fix the steering axis in place. As you can see, the axis of the steering turns when we tighten the bolt, so if we want to tighten it more, we will need the tweezers as said. And just tighten them a little bit. Repeat the same with the other side. Also check that each steering arm has its own position for left and right. Now let's get installing the bearings into this front axis. The same process like with the rear ones. You can use your own hand to place them in. If you feel that they are so hard, then use the tools. And just like that, we have made one axis with 2 bearings. Now install them into the front case of the bearings housing. And just like that, all the way in. Check that everything moves, but if they don't move as good, you can push it a little bit to the backwards. Now let's place the front housing into the rear one. Remember to align the holes for the bolts. If you see the bearings, then everything is aligned. Repeat the same process with the other side. Check if everything moves, but if there's some debris inside, then what you can do is to use your electrical screwdriver later. Now we will need the flathead big bolts. We are gonna be starting to install all the control arms into the bearings housings. Again, use super glue for all the joints. Watch the video and stop it to check where each side goes. We are building right now the left side. Again, don't over tight these bolts, just be very careful. And here we have almost complete the left side. Now the top control arm, this is the number serial 1. Remember, these ones are using the thicker washers. And here we have our entire left control arm done. Now, if you feel that the bearings don't move like they should, or there's some debris inside the housing, you can use the electric screwdriver like I'm doing right now, just to clean all the internals. You can pull a little bit in and out, so they clean everything. And now, as you can see, everything should move freely. Let's repeat with the other side. We are making now the right side. Now let's take the suspension control arms. For these ones we will need 2 short round head bolts. Again, place these control arms into the lower position, the lower hole. Just insert the tip, align everything and bolt it. Again, if you don't feel that they move freely, just untight the bolts. This is the left side. Remember, check how the shape of the suspension control arm is so you don't miss them, as this one goes into its own side. Repeat the same process with the other side. This is the right side. Again, as you can see, it's not moving freely, so just untie a bit until it's moving more freely. No restrictions should be into these suspension control arms. Now let's install the suspension triangles. As you can see, that thicker part goes facing to the inside, and this shape goes looking to the outside. Here you have the proof. So we will need again 2 rounded short bolts. Again, insert only the tip of the bolt and then place the suspension triangle. Here you can see where they are facing and how they look in. Again, you must tighten everything, but remember, these ones must move freely. Now let's repeat with the other side. And here it is. This is the left side entire suspension and control arms. Here you can see both. And now let's get ready the front and rear connectors. These ones are gonna be placing the chassis into each shell. First, we will need to place inside this rod. This is the front connector, main chassis, main part. Place them together. These are the front small connectors. Here you can see the part that faces down and up. Slide them in the position that you want and then install the locking system. Here we have our front control system, our front connector. Now let's make the rear connector. Again, slide it into the place that you want. The higher, the more differences in height there will be between the shell and the chassis. And then install again the locking system. Ensure that nothing moves and everything is tied in place. Now let's place each connector into its own housing. The first time you place them in, you should feel like there's some drag, so sliding in and out until they move way much free. Remember, when you are placing the sliding lock for these ones, you must align those channels. This is the rear sliding locking system. Just compress a little bit that tip to make the process easier. Now align and move everything, and then place in the locking system. At first it should be quite a bit hard, so place it in and out a few times until everything is inside clean, even though later we can add some lubing oil, as you can see, to make everything easier. Now let's repeat the same process but with the front connectors. Slide everything in place. Remember, if there's any debris, clean it. Again, slide in and out a few times. And now install the sliding locking system. Remember to align the channels, compress the tip of this sliding system a bit, and again place it in and out a few times. If you still feel it hard, apply some lubing oil. And here we have our front and rear connectors. Now let's place this part for the control arms. In here we will have the rods of the top front control arms. For this one we are going to be using a rounded, thick, longer bolt. Place a bit the tip. Then place in position like seen. Now you can use that channel that we have in the front chassis to place in the screwdriver. Now we are going to be installing the front servo. Remember, the axis of the servo goes to the right. For this one, we are going to be using these flathead short bolts. You need to place them through the rear of the servo. Once in place, check that nothing moves, everything is tight. Now let's swap the differential gears from the V1.0 into the V1.3. At first, it should be move freely, without no restrictions, even though later we will apply some grease lubricant. Remember to place it all the way in, make a big force. Once everything is in, move forward this differential axis. As said, check that everything is in place. Now, as said, let's apply some lubricant. Once you apply a bit, move the gears so it's spread all over them. Remember to move the differential forward. If you move it backwards without the housing, the gears will come out from place. And as you can see, everything moves. Now it's time to install the rear differential cover. Once you have it in place, before placing the bolts, check that everything moves front and rear. For this one, we are going to be using the only 4 bolts that with the rounded head that we have left, the short ones. Place them through the top. And the last bolt that you can see right here is gonna be a tricky one. Don't place it through the bottom as it's not made that way. You can bolt it in the way that I'm using right now, using some tweezers. And there we have all our bolts for the differential casing all in place. Again, check that everything moves. Now let's place this front part of this spine structure into the chassis. For this one, you're going to be using a rounded head bolt. Check that nothing moves and everything is tight. Now let's install the battery straps. Remember that the part of the Velcro always must face down when you start to pull it in. This is the longer strap. This one goes longitudinal. And now let's go for the other one, the short one. Again, check that the Velcro always face down. Pass it through that channel is gonna be a little bit more tricky. You can install this strap, the first one, if you want. And there we have our battery straps installed. Now let's place the ESC in place. We have 2 mounting points. No matter if you have the MJX B1 or B2, we are going to be using 2 rounded head long bolts. Remember to align the holes, then check that everything is tight and in place. Now we will need the 3M double-side tape Just take a bit and place it into the receiver and into the gyro. This one goes into the hood cover of the battery. Remember to install the gyro with the cables looking to the outside. This is something very important. Now let's install the rear control arms. For this one we will need these rounded head bolts. Just install the tip, and in here remember we will have the rear suspension triangles. When installing these bolts, check that there's no debris inside. You can also start applying some loving oil for all these parts, as in here we will have some friction. Install the lower control arm, later install the suspension triangle. Tight the suspension triangle in place. Check that it should move freely, as you can see. If it's not moving freely, just clean the debris inside or untight the bolt. Then install the power axis in place and the lower control arm. If you want for these ones, you can apply some loving oil also. As you can see, everything must react and move. Install everything in place, as you can see. And now let's repeat with the other side the same process. As you can see, you have the L shape of the top control arms. So remember to follow that L shape to know which is right and left side. Again, lube everything and place it. Now we can install the other coilover into the suspension triangle of the right side. For this one, again remember we are going to be using the narrow flathead screws. Place the suspension triangle in position. Again, check that everything moves freely. And now let's install this part for the control arms. This one goes on the bottom. You have a cantilever, that one goes and faces down. For this task, we need these flathead big bolts. Tight it and check that everything moves correctly and there's no friction. If you feel some friction and drag, you can also clean the holes for the rods for the control arms. Also, we need to check the power axis, but after that, we will need to install the suspensions. Again, we will need the flathead narrow bolts. Compress a bit the suspension and bolt everything tight. Here we have almost complete our suspension geometry, and as you can see, it's not entirely complete, and even though it's reacting and working perfectly. Here, as you can see, I have a misaligned point. Remember, I am installing everything into 0.4, but remember, this will depend on which card you want to use from all the ones that I have released. Install the other coilover, and again, check everything, it's moving and reacting. Let's install the battery right now. Remove the straps, lift the hood if you want. Now tighten the straps. Remember, this RC chassis originally came with a 2S and 3S battery. With the 3S you will reach 80 km per hour, with the 2S you will reach 50 to 60 km per hour. This one is the bigger one, it's the 3S battery. Now pull all these connectors together, because it's time to test some things. Take your controller first, turn it on, then turn on the chassis. Let's check the power axis working. And here you can see everything is working perfectly. Now let's install the last part of this rear of the chassis. You need to remove the connector. Again, you need a flathead big bolt. Install only the tip, then align this connector with the top part of the control arms. And now bolt everything again. Check that the suspension is still moving and reacting. Unlock the system, place again in the connector, align everything together, close it, and there we have our rear part. Let's keep with the front part. For this one, now there's only one lift to assemble, which is the steering rack. This is a steering pillar, so as you can see, that's how it goes into the chassis. But first we need to install these steering rack arms. This is the left one. Place it in, move it and check that it's free. And now the other side. Here you can check the shape to know how it goes. If you feel that these parts don't fit the way they should, all you can do is to reprint them again alone. This is how they go. Now this part is from the MJX, and first we need to install these steering arms. Check their shape to know how they go. And now we need to pull all those bolts into those steering rack arms. Here you can see how they are being showed. Now let's make the other side. In this case, you must bolt everything very tight. Don't worry, they should move freely. Here it is how it looks. Check that everything moves perfectly. You must feel that these parts are very tight, and this is something very needed, so we don't have too much play on the steering. Now let's install the locking systems for the steering rack. This is how it must look. Now let's install this steering system. This is a steering arm again that controls everything and goes into the servo. For this one we will need a rounded head big bolt. You must remember this bolt from the top. Install only the tip. Now place it as you can see that way. into those steering rock arms. This is gonna be, as you can see, the one controlling the movement into the servo. If you feel it so tight, you can unbolt it, or you can also use some lubing oil. This one shouldn't move as freely as you expect, again because the steering must be way much tighter. Lube any component that you can see that there's friction. Now this is what controls and goes into the servo axis. For this one we will need 2 rounded head bolts. This is the one that will tighten this component into the steering axis, and the other bolt will go into this joint of the steering arm. It goes through the front and now into this other component. In this one you must tighten everything very tightly again. And as we have a joint in this steering arm, it should unlock and then move freely. Here you can see it. Now let's place all these parts into the front chassis. Place everything in place in the way that you can see, and now we will need to install 2 bolts into these steering columns. For this task we will need 2 rounded head bolts. You must press the steering columns into the chassis with your own force when you are tightening everything. Check that nothing tilts front and back. First you should do the right side of this steering column and then the left side. Now once you have bolted everything, it's time to check that everything moves perfectly. This is like an anti-roll bar part component to make the front chassis way much stronger. You need to install the front tips of these ones in place, as you can see. Again, a rounded head big bolt for this one to place it again tight. This one goes all the way in. And now we need to connect the servo into the ESC gyroscope. We need to turn on the controller and later turn on the chassis. Remember to align everything into the center. This is the ST trim button. This is to later have more control into the steering in case that your chassis goes to the left and right. So align that into the center, turn on the chassis so the servo is into the center when we are installing this steering control part. Apply some glue, it's very highly recommended. Place the steering into the center in the way that you can, most visible. Place this component into the steering axis. For this one you will need to make a lot of force. Remember, if the chassis looks or faces a bit to the left when you are moving, you can adjust it through the ST trim knob. Now tighten this component as much as you can. Don't tighten it too much because then you can break it. And now check that everything moves like you can see. Now it's perfect. Again, as you can see, here you can adjust the center of the driving with the ST trim knob. Now we can unplug again the steering servo. Let's keep installing the front control arms and front suspension. Unlock the steering control arms. Place the bottom, later place the suspension triangle. Place the top of the control arms, and now pull in the steering rack into the steering control arm. Again, you must place it into position number 4 if your control arms are in position number 4. Just like that, as you can see. Repeat the same process with the other side. Here it is, almost entirely assembled. Now we will need this front connector for the top control arms. Align the rods of this, place it in, align with the bolt, with the hole for the bolt. For this one, we will need a flathead big bolt. This one goes all the way in. Check that the suspension geometry moves freely and the suspension triangles react. Now, like we did with the previous ones, with the rear ones, we need to apply some lubing oil. We will need to take again 2 rounded head bolts. These are the longer ones. Install first the tip like we did with the rear ones. Apply lubing oil in every single component that moves. Now we need to install the suspension coilovers. As you can see, that red side of the coilover goes into the front. As you can see, in that way, the rod and bolt holes must be aligned. For these ones, we are using again a narrow flathead bolt. This one goes almost all the way in, but again you must check that the suspension coilover moves freely and there's no friction. If there's friction, you must untighten a bit these bolts. As you can see, now it's falling by its own gravity. Repeat the same process with the other side. Now place the suspension triangles into its own moving axis and bolt everything tight. Again, check that everything moves freely. Now face down these joints, compress them, and let's place those bolts. Again, flathead narrow bolts. For these ones, if you want, you can use thin washers. And now, as you can see, the suspension is working and reacting. And that's the other side, again working and reacting perfectly. Now let's install the front connector component. Again, take out the connector. So we can install the bolt, we will need a flathead, thicker, big bolt. Install again only the tip. Place it in place, aligning with the rods of the control arms. Ensure that everything is in and it's in place, and bolt everything together. Check now that everything is moving, everything is reacting, there's no friction. If there's so with any component, remember to clean their insides. Now let's install the front connector. Again, align with its own channel, slide the locking system. And here we have our entire front connector done. Now let's open the rear chassis. Remember, you will adjust this part depending on the car you're installing. Place it all the way in, test that it's moving freely. When it's unlocked, lock everything in place. Now install the servo again. And here we have our GT-RC R V.1.3 converted. Again, check everything is reacting, everything is moving. As I was saying, you can check if there's any debris inside, or if there's some components that haven't been printed in the way they have to, print them alone. Now let's install the rims. Again, remember it's very important to align these shapes. They have like a rectangle shape, so you must align them. Once all the rims are in, you have to use the M3 8mm bolts for these ones. Also worth noting that some cars that I have released will have different front and rear rims. So this is something that you also must notice. And there it is, entirely done, our GT-RC R V.1.3. Now it's time to take a ride. So thanks so much for everyone for watching this video. Remember, you will have this chassis available at cults.com. I will leave a link in the description, and nothing more to say. Thanks so much for watching this video. I hope you liked the assembly. I tried to make it as entertainment as possible, but also I need to show every single detail, so that's why this video it's so long. So again, thanks so much for everything, and see you on the next video. Enjoy the ride.